Amid countless worlds that seem like pure fiction, lie battles, sacrifices, and secrets that have never been told. Every story is a war between destiny and choice. If you're ready to uncover heroes, villains, and the forgotten souls lost in between, then step into the world of Comic Recap, where every tale is a battle for survival.
Tamriel, a land where the gods destroyed Lorcan and left behind their towering fortress of secrets, where the mortal realm of Mundus meets the endlessness of Oblivion and the eternity of Aetherius. Over the ages, many rulers have attempted to control it, but only those chosen by the gods have succeeded. Welcome to our video exploring the history of the Elder Scrolls universe, where we begin our journey into Tamriel's past, focusing on the empires of men, specifically the third and most renowned of these empires, the Septim dynasty, the bloodline of Talus Stormcrown. Powerful bloodlines hold great significance in many fantasy worlds, none more so than in our sponsor, Bloodline Heroes of Lithos. This unique RPG lets you pair mighty champions to create offspring that inherit their traits, gradually strengthening your bloodline and selecting the most powerful heirs to lead your kingdom. It's free to play on Android or iOS. Log in now to get the Dragonborn clan card, one of many champion clans, including the formidable Lycanis werewolves. As you progress, more companion options will become available. Eventually, you'll receive a free half Dragonborn, half demigod heir to further your kingdom's legacy. Their power will help you address the economic, political, and military challenges ahead, and in time, they will empower the next generation. Strengthen your relationships with your companions to produce even more powerful offspring. By combining different bloodlines and traits, you can create the ultimate heirs. Download the game for free on Android or iOS using the link in the description or the QR code on screen, and use the code BLDHOL, one for a free champion token, 100,000 gold, and 100 diamonds. Begin your journey to meet true companions in this unique RPG. The earliest known inhabitants of what would become Tamriel were the Beast Folk, the ancient ancestors of the reptilian Argonians, feline Khajiit, and other species like the ape-like Inga, as well as the now extinct Foxfolk and Birdfolk. Later, the Aldmer, or Elder Folk, arrived, landing millennia ago on what is now the Somerset Isles, beginning the Merethic era, the Age of Elves. From there, the Aldmer began colonizing the mainland, driving the beast folk into the harsh deserts, jungles, and swamps at the continent's edges. In the heart of Cyrodiil, they constructed the White Gold Tower, which would forever symbolize imperial power for anyone who controlled it. As time passed, the Elder Folk became more divided. The Elves, who settled in modern Morrowind, became the Chimer, ancestors of the Dark Elves. At the same time, the Elves in the White Gold Tower evolved into the Ayleids, or Heartland Wild Elves. These two groups began worshipping the Daedra of Oblivion, a practice their Aldmer ancestors had strictly forbidden. Some elves became the Dwemer, or Deep Folk, rejecting the supremacy of all gods and forming underground technocratic societies. Those who ventured into the forests of Valenwood became the wild and carnivorous Bosmer, or Wood Elves, while those who remained in High Rock or Alinor became the Altmer, or High Elves, the closest descendants of the original Aldmer. There is little agreement about how or when humans first arrived in Tamriel. According to Nordic myth, they were created on the highest mountain in Skyrim, by the sky goddess Kine. Regardless of origin, by the middle of the Merethic era, various human tribes had spread across the continent. In many areas, they were dominated by the elves. In High Rock, they fell under the control of the Altmer Durrani clan, who intermingled with humans to create a mixed race, gifted with magic. These became the ancestors of the Bretons. In Cyrodiil, humans were enslaved by the Aelids, who subjected them to horrific practices like flesh sculpting and gut gardening, often encouraged by their Daedric patrons. In return, these Daedric beings gave the Aelids armies of their monstrous creations. However, as the Merethic era transitioned into the First Era, the balance began to shift in favor of humanity. The pivotal change came when the ancestors of the Nords migrated from Atmora back to Skyrim. They initially coexisted peacefully with the Snow Elves, or Falmer, until the Falmer attacked the city of Sarthal. A survivor named Ysgramor escaped to Atmora, returned with an army called the 500 Companions, and led a brutal campaign to claim Skyrim for the Nords. Around the same time in Cyrodiil, a slave praying at Sancretor received a divine vision from Akatosh, who granted her dragon's blood and the Amulet of Kings. This slave, named Alessia, led a revolt that ended in the capture of the White Gold Tower in 1 E243. She established the first human empire, and her dragon-blooded successors ruled from the Ruby Throne for 2 millennia. Following the fall of Elven rule, human cultures began to solidify. In High Rock, the weakening of the Durrani allowed their Breton descendants to rise in power, while the Nords prospered in Skyrim. Although Elven kingdoms still existed, the dominance of the elves was clearly over, and the era of human ascendancy had begun. Despite her achievements, Alessia's empire never fully unified humanity. The Nords resisted outside control, and the influence over the Breton rulers was unstable. Meanwhile, a new human force appeared, the Redguards, who had destroyed their homeland of Yokuda and arrived in Tamriel in 1 E808. They quickly conquered the Alikar Desert and displaced its native peoples. By 1 E2331, Alessia's empire collapsed due to internal religious conflicts, leading Cyrodiil to fragment into small kingdoms for the next 4 centuries. Eventually, a new empire emerged, led by a rightful dragonborn ruler. Legend says this began with the spirit of Alessia, bound to Sancretor, uniting with a mad king named Hrol. From this mystical union came Reman, a dragonborn child with the Amulet of Kings embedded in his forehead. Reman's first challenge came in 1 E2703, when the Seishi from Akavir invaded northern Tamriel. Some say the Saesi were snake-like beings, while others describe them as another human race. The invaders swept through the Nordic armies and fortified themselves at a mountain stronghold called Pale Pass. Reman used the threat they posed to unify the various lords of Cyrodiil under his rule. He then advanced to Pale Pass to face them. However, in a surprising twist, the Saeshi immediately surrendered upon hearing Reman's voice, declaring that they had finally found what they were searching for in Tamriel, the Dragonborn. With this, Reman became the most powerful figure in Tamriel, backed not only by Cyrodiil, but also by the formidable Snake Men, who he formed into an elite force known as the Dragon Guard. Under Reman and his successors, a new empire of man emerged. In the central regions, a blend of Nordic, Breton, and native Cyrodiilic cultures led to the development of the modern imperial people. This empire succeeded where the Alessians had failed, bringing Skyrim, High Rock, and Hammerfell under its control. Eventually, even the Elven and Beastfolk territories, fearing Reman's military power, pledged nominal loyalty to the Second Empire. The exception was Morrowind, where the Dark Elves, after a series of events involving the heart of Lorkhan, the disappearance of the Dwemer, and a curse from the Daedric Prince Azura, were governed by a trio of godlike rulers. These beings later defeated and killed Reman II in battle. This defeat marked the beginning of the Empire's decline. In the year 2920 of the First Era, the Tseseshi Dragon Guard overthrew Reman III and established a new government called the Akaviri Potentate. The fall of the Reman dynasty ended the First Era, and 430 years later, the assassination of the last Tsayeski ruler brought down the empire they had sustained. With the Dragonborn bloodline extinguished, the Amulet of Kings lost, and Tamriel divided once again, a new chapter began. It was during this period that a man known by many names, Stormcrown Tiberius Imperator, was born. Tiber Septim came into the world in the year 828 of the Second Era. Little is known of his early life. Later accounts claimed he was born in Atmora with the name Talos, meaning storm crown in ancient Elnofex. A conflicting version, known as the Arcturian Heresy, states he was born in Alcair, High Rock, and originally named Hjalti Earlybeard. Regardless of his true origins, Hjalti, or Talos, spent his youth in Skyrim, where the Nords raised him as a warrior and taught him to master both weapons and his voice. The Nords had long practiced the Thuum, a form of magic taught to them by dragons. Mastery of even a few words took years, but Talos quickly gained immense power, matching the strength of the most ancient dragons. As a teenager, he entered the service of Cuchulainn, the petty king of Falkreath. Impressed by his mastery of the Thuum, Cuchulainn promoted him to general. Talos earned his title when he led a campaign against the Reachmen, a fierce group descended from the Bretons. With a small force of Nordic and Colovian warriors, Hjalti defeated the Reachmen and drove them into the fortress of Old Hroldan. Confident behind their walls, the Reachmen taunted him until a violent storm struck. Empowered by the weather, Talos used his Thuum to bring down the fortress walls and captured the keep, securing the reach for Cuchulainn. He was only 20 years old. It was likely at this moment that his followers began calling him Talos Stormcrown. After the fall of Old Hroldan, the skies darkened and thunder echoed across the land. From high Hrothgar, atop the throat of the world, the Greybeards, Nordic monks and masters of the Thuum spoke his name, and the world trembled. No one took the summons of the Greybeards lightly, so Talos climbed to High Hrothgar. There, he was named Ismair, Dragon of the North, and recognized as Dragonborn the first since Reman. They foretold that, like those before him, he was destined to unite all of Tamriel. Talos' recent victories had made him powerful, attracting new enemies. In 2E852, a coalition of Nordic clans and Breton kingdoms invaded Cyrodiil. They occupied key passes in the Jural Mountains and took control of Sancre Tor, a sacred city where Alessia once received a divine vision from Akatosh. From there, they planned to conquer all of Tamriel and dared Talos reputedly unbeatable to try and stop them. This confrontation marked the beginning of Talos' rise to legendary status, the Battle of Sancretor. Despite the harsh winter, he accepted the challenge and marched south from Falkreath. To avoid enemy forces in the mountain passes, he led his army directly over the mountains, mirroring the tactics of a general from another world. When Talos and his Colovian soldiers finally descended onto the Cyrodiilic plains, they were exhausted, poorly supplied, and unprepared for the winter. Meanwhile, the enemy had fortified Sancretor, building high walls atop sheer cliffs. The only entrance was hidden in a mountain basin, obscured by a magical illusion that made it appear to be a lake. Talos arrived below the fortress with his weary troops, clearly visible to the defenders. Mistaking their numbers and condition as weakness, the Nord-Breton alliance decided to leave the safety of their stronghold and launch a full assault, leaving only a small garrison behind. What they didn't know was that Talos had won over a Breton defector who revealed the hidden entrance. The army they saw was just a decoy. The rest of Talos' forces had used the secret route, climbed the cliffs, and slipped past the illusion to position themselves behind enemy lines. As the main enemy force charged into the plains, Talos' rearguard held their ground bravely. At the same time, Talos used his powerful voice, the Thuum to blast open the citadel's gate. With his best warriors, he stormed inside, swiftly defeating the small garrison and capturing the remaining enemy nobles. When news of the fortress's fall spread, morale among the attackers collapsed. The Nord troops, suspicious of their Breton allies and deeply respectful of Talos' dragonborn status, abandoned the Bretons and pledged loyalty to him. Even the Nordic generals joined him. The Breton leaders were executed, and their soldiers either imprisoned or enslaved. After the victory, Talos toured the ancient tombs beneath Sancretor, where past dragonborn rulers were buried. There, among the spirits of Alessia and Raymond, he found the tomb of Raymond III, the last emperor of Manand, upon his body, the Amulet of Kings, symbol of mankind's pact with Akatosh. In Tamriel, such moments are rarely seen as chance. Holding the amulet, Talos likely knew the Greybeard's prophecy was beginning to unfold. At this point in time, Talos was not yet emperor, but a general serving under King Culhwch. Through Talos' unmatched leadership and powerful Thuum, one kingdom after another fell under Culhwch's control. Just a few months after the Battle of Sancretor, Talos had secured the Colovian regions of western Cyrodiil, and soon after, the merchant rulers of Nibene in the east also submitted. In the year 2E 854, Talos led his forces into the imperial city, home of the White Gold Tower, where past Reman emperors had once lit the dragon fires in Akatosh's temple to signify their rule. With the imperial heartland under control, Culhwch intended to declare himself emperor with Talos at his side. However, Culhwch was not dragonborn and could not wear the Amulet of Kings, making his claim ultimately unsustainable. What happened next is heavily disputed. Some say a Reachman assassin infiltrated the palace and killed Culhwch, injuring Talos in the process by slashing his throat, though he survived. Others believe Talos himself was responsible for the assassination and wounded his own throat to avoid suspicion. Regardless of the truth, it was the Dragon of the North who emerged wearing the Amulet of Kings, renewing the covenant with Akatosh and becoming the first dragonborn emperor of the Third Empire of Man. Though the injury to his throat left him unable to shout again, he went on to conquer. Cyrodiil was his, but it was only the beginning. According to the prophecy of the Greybeards, the one known as Storm Crown was fated to unite all of Tamriel not as Talos, but as a reborn man, taking a new name in honor of his adopted homeland. He became known as Tiber Septim. The story of how the Dragon of the North brought together humans, elves, and beast folk has been told in many conflicting versions. The account that follows is one interpretation drawn from two key but contradictory sources: the official narrative found in the Pocket Guide to the Empire and the more controversial Arcturian heresy. To begin, it's important to know about two men who were vital to Stormcrown's campaign of expansion. The first was Ysmir Wulfarth, an ancient high king of Skyrim who lived long before Talos. According to legend, Wulfarth died in a battle against the death god Orki, aging himself to death while using his Thuum to lift a curse that had turned Skyrim's people into children. Yet, time and again, his ashes are said to have returned to life through the will of the Nordic god Shor, granting him a form of immortality. Throughout the First Era, this Ash King developed a fierce hatred for the elves of Morrowind, who had used the heart of his god Shor to become gods themselves. Though he tried many times to defeat them, the Chimeran, later the Dunmer, continually destroyed him. In the late Second Era, Wulfarth returned once more and allied himself with Talos, believing that Stormcrown was the one destined to finally unite Tamriel and defeat the elves. The second crucial figure was Zurin Arctis, a master sorcerer who was said to be among the most powerful mages in Tamriel's history. Some accounts suggest he was a reincarnation of Magnus, the divine origin of magic. Whatever the truth, Zurin had served Talos since his days as a general under Kulakain. After Talos became Emperor Tiber Septim, Zurin Arctis took the role of his chief battle mage. This is where the story continues. In the year 2 E854, Kulakain was assassinated, and Talos, now known as Tiber Septim Relit, the Dragonfires of Alessia and Riemann, proclaiming himself the first emperor of the Third Empire of Tamriel. What caused the conflict between humans and elves? How did Talos' injury affect his leadership? Explain the significance of the Amulet of Kings. There is still much left to accomplish. Although Cyrodiil and the Reachlands had come under his control, the rest of the continent remained unconquered. The remaining free human kingdoms were next in line. Skyrim pledged loyalty with little resistance, as he had grown up there and was seen by the Jarls as one of their own. The influence of Ash King Wulfarth, the voice of Shor, likely played a role in bringing Skyrim into the Empire. High Rock soon followed. The Bretons, long divided into small feudal states, were easy targets for the combined forces of Skyrim and Cyrodiil. Ironically, the Nords and Bretons, whose earlier attempts to conquer Cyrodiil were stopped at Sancre-Torware, now ruled by an emperor raised by Nords and likely born a Breton. After these victories, only one human realm remained outside the empire. The next challenge was Hammerfell, home to fierce warriors known for their curved swords. In the late Second Era, Hammerfell had enjoyed a period of rare peace. The growing power of the Empire on its eastern border had pushed the two rival factions within Hammerfell, the Crowns and the Forbearstow, unite under High King Thassid II, a crown who maintained a moderate stance that kept both sides at peace. When the Saad died in 2E862, his more hardline son, Prince Ator, took the throne. Old tensions flared up, and civil war soon erupted across the Alakir. This internal conflict opened the door for imperial involvement. Baron Volag, leader of the Forebears, sent envoys to the Emperor seeking aid. Losing ground to the crowns, Volag offered allegiance to the Empire in exchange for help defeating his enemies. The Emperor accepted swiftly. Within a year, Imperial legions launched an assault on Hammerfell, forcing the Crown forces to retreat to the coast. Prince Ator fought back fiercely, but was outnumbered. He eventually withdrew to the Crown's stronghold on the island of Stros Makai with the remains of his navy. In 2E864, the Emperor appointed Admiral Emil Richten, a top naval commander, to eliminate the last resistance. The Imperial New West Navy, pride of Colovia, sailed to Stros Makai and met the Royal Navy of Hammerfell, led by Prince Ader, just beyond Port Hunding's harbor. Details about the two fleets are limited, but it's likely the Imperials had superior numbers. Still, Prince Ator was fearless. He ordered his ships into formation and engaged the enemy. The Red Guards likely relied on swift ships and rapid boarding tactics, launching brutal close-quarters combat while Imperial mages and archers tried to repel them with fire and arrows. Prince Ator led from the front, moving his flagship wherever the fighting was fiercest. These were not conditions favorable to the Imperials, whose doctrines warned against close combat. As Zurin Arctus's manual advised, close battles were risky. Even powerful magic could fail, and courage could upend strategy. The Red Guard's relentless attacks kept Imperial forces under constant pressure. Despite his fleet's advantage in numbers, Richten saw the battle turning against him. He then played his final Carta secret weapon he had hoped not to use. In ancient times, dragons ruled the north until humans learned to shout, overthrowing them. Later, the Akaviri invasion nearly wiped out the dragons, leaving only a few survivors, proud and immortal. Some of these beings eventually chose to serve humankind rather than dominate them. On the significant day in the Second Era, year 854, red wings darkened the skies above Hunting Bay. Nafalar the Red, a dragon loyal to Tiber Septim, was deployed to battle. Aware that dragonfire could devastate his fleet, Prince Ator ordered his ships to retreat, scatter, and focus their attacks on Nafalar. At that moment, a poisoned arrow from a rogue Dunmer assassin using the Daedric Bow of Shadows struck the prince. His archmage, Voa, managed to preserve Ator's soul in a soul gem, but shortly after, Dragonfire sank the Red Guard flagship. Amid the chaos of the prince's death, the dragon continued its assault, forcing the fleet to retreat to Stros Makai. Most troops landed in the heavily defended Old Quarter, seeking protection behind its walls. In response, Richten ordered the dragon, Nafali Largus, to burn down the entire district, killing everyone inside. The battle ended in a clear Imperial victory, and with the Crown forces defeated, Hammerfell was absorbed into the Empire. Despite earlier promises, power wasn't handed to the Forebears. Instead, Cyrodiilic governors were appointed, with Admiral Richten in charge. This direct rule angered the Red Guards, sparking a widespread rebellion. The uprising succeeded when the rebel hero Cyrus killed Nafalar, weakening Imperial hold over the region. The Empire was then forced to sign the Treaty of Stros-Mackay, granting Hammerfell internal autonomy under continued imperial authority, with both crowns and forebears retaining influence. Ultimately, Tiber's Septim achieved what once seemed impossible, unifying all human territories of Tamriel under his rule. With Hammerfell annexed, only non-human regions remained unconquered harsh lands of ash, jungles, deserts, and swamps. These could not be taken through standard military means. To address this, Tiber adopted a strategy of rapid military strikes, followed by diplomatic offers. After brief campaigns, local populations were granted cultural, religious, and political autonomy in exchange for loyalty to the empire. This approach avoided drawn-out conflicts. This method was used in Elsewhere. When imperial forces entered, they took parts of northern Anakina and expelled the native Khajiit. After the city of Sinchal resisted surrender, it was stormed and all inhabitants were killed. This massacre was later erased from official records. Nevertheless, Elsewhere was incorporated into the empire, and to prevent further unrest, the Khajiit were allowed to keep their traditions and leadership under the Mane. The situation in Black Marsh was different. Few dared to enter the dangerous, disease-ridden swamps. The Argonians were hostile and elusive, and even Tiber Septim recognized the futility of a full invasion. The Empire secured only the coastal areas, avoiding the deadly interior. Though resistance remained, the region was declared subdued. With the Beastfolk territories under nominal control, Tiber turned his attention eastward toward Morrowind, a land that had always resisted human conquest. The Ash King Wolfhearth served as a constant reminder to Tiber Septim. During the late Second Era, Morrowind was governed by Almalexia, Sotha Sil, and Vivek, the Tribunal of Living Gods, who had led the Dunmer for thousands of years. To the soldiers of Cyrodiil, Morrowind was a desolate wasteland inhabited by fanatical, demon-eyed people, and they feared invading it. According to the Arcturian heresy, even Tiber himself hesitated to antagonize the Dark Elves and had to be pressured by the Ash King, who was determined to defeat his ancient enemies once and for all. Eventually, Tiber was convinced, likely enticed by Morrowind's vast ebony resources. An invasion fleet was assembled along Skyrim's northern coast, while Imperial legions gathered in northeastern Cyrodiil. The legions advanced into Morrowind, facing fierce resistance. Despite this, they managed to reach and sack Mournhold, the capital. Sensing the tide turning, Vivek, poet and warrior of the Tribunal, sought negotiations with the Emperor. They struck a deal. Morrowind would join the Empire, but retain full autonomy, including freedom of religion and self-rule. This agreement allowed Tiber to avoid heavy losses, but it angered the Ash King, who had wanted the Tribunal destroyed. Feeling betrayed by the alliance with the very foes he sought to destroy, Wolfhearth withdrew his support from the Septim cause. Though a significant loss, this was outweighed by what the Emperor gained: Numidium. Numidium was a colossal metal golem, originally created by the Dwemer in their quest to forge a new god using the heart of Lorkhan. This attempt at godhood led to the disappearance of the Dwemer. After their vanishing, the Tribunal took possession of Numidium and later offered it to Tiber Septim as part of the peace treaty. With Lorkhan's heart still sealed beneath Red Mountain, the Numidium was inert, just a brass shell without a soul. At this point, the only remaining opposition to the Septim Empire was the Aldmeri Dominiona Union of the Bosmer from Valenwood and the Altmer from Alinor. Before Tiber's rise, the Dominion had been the dominant power on the continent. Now, Tamriel was split between them and the growing Third Empire. Elsewhere had once been a client state of the Dominion before being absorbed by the Empire. Tensions were high, and war between humans and elves was inevitable. War began in 2E887 and lasted for 9 years. Imperial legions marched into Valenwood, facing brutal terrain and fierce resistance from the Bosmer, who were supported by the Altmer. The dense forests and savage warfare made the campaign grueling, but the Empire advanced and eventually extended its standard offer: cultural and religious freedom in return for submission. Valenwood became a province of the Empire, retaining a ceremonial king from the Cameron line and limited self-governance through a council of tribal leaders. While the conquest of Valenwood was difficult, an invasion of the Altmer homeland was nearly impossible. Alinor was a fortified island defended by a superior navy and powerful sorcerers wielding ancient, nearly incomprehensible magics. Any attempt to land troops there would have been hopeless until Zurin Arctis brought game-changing news to Tiber. You're giving feedback on a new version of ChatGPT. Which response do you prefer? Responses may take a moment to load. ChatGPT Response 1. Numidium was completed. The Imperial Battle Mage had spent a long time carefully reconstructing the god robot. The next challenge was finding a way to power it. Originally, Numidium drew its energy from the heart of Lorcanhow. Could anyone replace a god's heart? 2 different tales describe what followed. In one, Zurin willingly gave up his life for Tiber, transferring his soul into a massive soul gem. In the other, Zurin and Tiber lured Wolfarth, the Ash King, with promises of joining forces to destroy the Tribunal of Morrowind. But it was a trap. Wolfarth was ambushed, imprisoned, and his soul was extracted. Regardless of the version, the outcome was the same. The Mantilla Vast Gem, infused either with the essence of a powerful mage tied to Magnus or an undying king tied to shore. With the Mantilla, Tiber Septim activated Numidium. In the year 896 of the Second Era, the giant brass construct darkened the skies over the crystal towers of Alinor. The exact methods Tiber used against the High Elves remain unclear, but their effectiveness is undisputed. The Altmer suffered immense destruction as time and space unraveled across their sacred land. The invasion of Alinor seemed to last both forever and only a moment. In the end, the islands were annexed into the Empire. The Tiber Wars concluded, and the dragon banner of the Third Empire flew over all of Tamriel. Following Tamriel's unification, the Second Era ended and the Third Era began. For 40 years, the Dragon of the North ruled over what was considered a golden age of peace and prosperity according to imperial records. In the 38th year of the Third Era, the man once known as Shalti, raised as Talos and crowned as Tiber Septim, died. His spirit was so powerful that upon death, he ascended to godhood. The Imperials had long worshipped a pantheon of 8 Aedric gods. After his death, Tiber Septim became the 9th Talos, god of war and governance. The High Elves, who believed themselves to descend from the Aedra and viewed mortality as a curse, were horrified. One of their oldest enemies, a mortal man, had achieved divinity. All they could do was quietly seethe. Tiber Septim's rule had brought peace, but after his death, a series of ineffectual emperors led the empire into civil wars and rebellions. Notable among these were the Wolf Queen Potema and the Dread King Haemon Cameron of Valenwood. The empire teetered on the edge of collapse, but it wasn't to fall. A year after Haemon's downfall, a true warrior rose to claim the Ruby Throne. He refocused Tamriel away from internal division and rekindled the spirit of conquest exemplified by his ancestor, Talos Stormcrown. Emperor Uriel Septim V, in his determination and drive, proved a worthy heir to Tiber. Unlike the idle or weak rulers before him, Uriel was a soldier above all. To him, the solution to the empire's troubles was clear: a bold display of power, a grand military campaign to inspire both fear and loyalty. But what was left to conquer? Tamriel, the known world, was already part of the Empyrate, least in name. Other continents existed, but most were uninviting. Atmora, the ancient homeland of the Nords, had become a frozen, deserted wasteland by the Third Era. I prefer this response. ChatGPT Response 2. More direct answer. Numidium was complete. The Imperial Battle Mage had spent a long time carefully reconstructing the god robot. Now the challenge was figuring out how to activate it. Originally, Numidium drew its power from the heart of Lorcan. Replacing the heart of a god would be no simple task. Two different accounts describe what happened next. In one, Zurin sacrificed himself for Tiber, channeling his life force into a large soul gem. In another, Zurin and Tiber tricked Wulfarth Ash King into returning by promising to destroy the Tribunal of Morrowind with him, only to ambush him, trap him, and drain his soul. Either way, the outcome was the same: the Mantella. This was a massive gem containing the power either of a powerful mage linked to Magnus or an immortal king tied to shore. With the Mantella, Tiber Septim activated Numidium. In the year 896 of the Second Era, the brass giant darkened the skies over the glass towers of Alinor. The specifics of how Tiber used Numidium against the High Elves are unknown, but the devastation was absolute. Time and space on their sacred island were torn apart, leaving lingering temporal disturbances. The invasion of Alinor seemed to both last forever and end in an instant. The islands were then annexed into the Empire. The Tiber Wars ended, and the dragon banner of the Third Empire flew over all of Tamriel. This marked the end of the Second Era and the beginning of the Third. For the next 40 years, a period of peace and prosperity followed, at least according to Imperial records. In the 38th year of the Third Era, the man born as Hjalti, raised as Talos, and crowned as Tiber Septim, died. His spirit was so powerful that upon death, he became a god. Since Alessia's time, the Imperials had worshipped 8 Aedra. In death, Tiber Septim became the 9th Talos, god of war and governance. The High Elves, who believed themselves descended from the Aedra and saw mortality as a curse, watched in horror as a human achieved the godhood they longed for. All they could do was nurture their bitterness. Though Tiber's reign brought peace and stability, his successors proved weak or incompetent. Civil wars and rebellions erupted, including those led by the infamous Wolf Queen Potema and the dread warlord Haemon Cameron of Valenwood. The empire nearly collapsed, but not completely. A year after Haemon's defeat, a true warrior claimed the Ruby Throne. He would shift Tamriel's focus from internal chaos back to strength and conquest, reviving the spirit of Talos. Emperor Uriel Septim V stood apart from the indulgent or powerless rulers before him. More soldier than prince, he believed the empire's turmoil could only be solved through overwhelming Forcia, great campaign that would inspire fear and unity. It was a bold plan, but with Tamriel already under imperial control, where could he turn his ambition? Other continents existed, but most were unsuitable. At Mora, the ancient homeland of the Nords, had become an empty, frozen wasteland by the Third Era. I prefer this response. Long ago, the ancestral land of the Redguards, Yokuda, was lost beneath the sea. Beyond Tamriel, the world of Nirn offered few other inhabited lands. One major exception was Akavir, the mysterious eastern continent deeply embedded in Tamrielic legend. Twice had its inhabitants attempted to invade Tamriel. First, the serpent, like Sayeski, and later, the Kamal, described as snow demons. The Sayeski, in particular, left a lasting mark by submitting to Reman Cyrodiil and playing a vital role in establishing his second empire. Even centuries later, during the Third Era, the elite blades still wore armor modeled after Akaviri designs. Yet, despite this influence, knowledge of Akavir itself remained scarce. Most of what was known came from the rambling, mysterious Akavir, written by an unknown author, which, in addition to snake men and snow demons, told of monkey-like beings, shape-shifting tigers, and dragons. The allure of Akavir did not deter Emperor Uriel's ambitions, though he knew he could not proceed without preparation. Before launching an invasion of the Dragonland, he needed to establish a logistical network across the Sea of Ghosts and the Padomaic Sea. In the year 271 of the Third Era, an imperial fleet with the 5th Legion departed from the great docks of Solitude, heading northeast to the cold, remote island of Rosgria. After a month-long voyage, the fleet arrived on the southeastern coast of Rosgria. Without making contact with the island's native population, Uriel ordered the immediate construction of a port town and a fortress named Crane Shore in Fort Uriel. The island's inhabitants, distant relatives of Skyrim's Nords, were descended from ancient Atmaran settlers. Unlike the Nords, who had absorbed various cultural and religious elements over the centuries, the Rosgrians remained isolated and maintained many old Atmaran traditions, including a belief system based on animal totems such as the bear, owl, and whale. These beliefs shaped their warrior society, marked by fierce rivalries among totem cults. The dragon cult, however, was universally reviled. Dragons had once ruled the island, but had long since been overthrown by warriors of the bear cult. Their legacy, however, was not forgotten. When the Rosgrians saw the dragon-emblazoned banners of the arriving Imperial fleet symbols of the Emperor's divine connection to Akatosh, they feared the return of their ancient oppressors. In the month of Second Seed, a large force of bear cult warriors, led by Chief Gundar Whitebear, attacked Crane Shore, killing its inhabitants. The Imperials, having had little interaction with the natives until then, were caught off guard. This event, later called the Sack of Crane Shore, marked the beginning of the war between the 5th Legion and the Rosgrians. In retaliation, the Empire struck back with force. From Fort Uriel, General Didymos was tasked with leading half of the 5th Legion to assault the native mining town of Stonewall. Despite strong resistance from the Bear Cult warriors defending the mountainous approaches, the Imperials eventually captured the town and responded to the earlier attack in kind. However, the cost was steep. For every Roscrean killed, a dozen Imperial soldiers fell. Do you like this personality? While this was happening, Uriel sent the Imperial fleet to take control of the island's coastal settlements. The fishing village of Vengold, home to the whale cult, which had long suffered under the dominant bear cult, welcomed the Red Navy as liberators. However, the villagers soon regretted this, as the Imperials disregarded local allegiances and treated all natives as enemies. The fleet then moved on to Iandur, which met a similar fate and surrendered to Imperial rule. These coastal victories cut off Frultul, the bear cult's capital, from the rest of the island. Located deep in the mountainous northwest and heavily fortified with Atmaran stonework, Frultul presented a major challenge. The 5th Legion was already depleted from the battle for Stonewall, and General Didymos did not want to risk more casualties by assaulting such a heavily defended position. Instead, he ordered the construction of Fort Sepphoris to control the Stonewall Pass, the only mountain route connecting Frultul to the island's fertile southeast, effectively cutting off the bear cult by land, while the Imperial Navy blocked access to the sea. For 3 months, a tense standoff followed. Despite being surrounded, Chief Gundar and his bear cult warriors refused to surrender. Raiders frequently launched attacks from Frultul, striking targets like Stonewall, which changed hands several times. Familiar with the terrain, the Roscreans effectively harassed Imperial patrols, foragers, and scouts. With winter nearing, Emperor Uriel grew impatient. Too many men and resources were being lost over an isolated island that offered little strategic value beyond serving as a supply port. Determined to end the conflict, he enlisted Cato of Skingrad, a missionary who had earned the trust of the natives by learning their language and customs. Under Cato's leadership, a treaty was brokered between the Emperor and Chief Gundar. According to its terms, the southeastern lowlands bounded by Fort Uriel, Crane Shore, and Fort Sepphoris would fall under direct Imperial control, while the bear cult would retain dominance over the rest of the island. With this, Roscrea was subdued and secured as the first supply station between Tamriel and Akavir. Though later reduced to a minor note in historical records, the conquest of Roscrea was a key step in Uriel V's greater plans, providing his forces with essential combat experience. The Far East awaited. It would take another 17 years for the Emperor and his fleet to reach Akavir. Much of that time was spent conquering smaller islands in the Pedomaic Sea and establishing supply ports. The islands of Kathnaki and Yenslia were brought under Imperial control in the years 276 and 279 of the Third Era, respectively. Then, in 284, Imperial forces seized Black Harbor on the spice-rich island of Ezrionet. With Ezrionet under control, Uriel turned his full attention to planning the Akaviri campaign. Naval expeditions in 285 and 286 mapped sea routes and coastlines, while Imperial agents, both magical and non-magical, gathered intelligence. Based on these findings, the southwestern kingdom of the Tsayeski was chosen as the initial invasion target. Scholars at the Imperial University have long debated the nature of the Tsayeski. Mysterious Akavir describes them as vampiric serpent beings who devoured Akavir's human population. However, surviving depictions of Tsayeski who served the Second Era's Reman suggest they were human. Another theory posits that the Tsayeshi were humans ruled by a serpentine aristocracy, and the term eaten may have been a mistranslation of a word meaning conquered. Alternatively, the Tsayeshi may have been shapeshifters capable of appearing human. They were formidable warriors, especially feared as hunters of dragons. According to the ancient dragon Parthernax, the Tsayeshi were responsible for exterminating most of his kind. Emperor Uriel faced a difficult campaign. On the 23rd of Rain's Hand, 3E-288, an Imperial invasion fleet set sail from Black Harbor, carrying the 5th, 7th, 10th, and 14th Legions. After a 6-week voyage, they landed in Akavir at the mouth of a large, fertile river valley. There, they discovered a small Tsayeshi town that had been entirely abandoned. The settlement was claimed and renamed Septimia, becoming the first colony of the new imperial province of Akavir. Once Septimia was fortified and its docks expanded, 2 of the legions advanced inland along the river, passing fertile but deserted farmlands. They soon encountered another empty settlement, which they named Ioneth. It was larger than Septimia and better positioned to control the surrounding region, so the Emperor established his headquarters there. Everything seemed to be going well. No resistance had been encountered, and the Empire had gained a foothold in Akavir. Confidence grew to the point where the remaining 9th and 17th Legions, still in Esroniet, were deemed unnecessary. Instead, the Imperial fleet began transporting civilian colonists to Septimia and Ioneth to work the abandoned farms. However, the Tsayeshi had not retreated. They were watching. As the Imperials moved forward, mounted Tsayeshi patrols followed them, beginning to disrupt scouting missions and obstruct the construction of a road between the 2 settlements. The Imperial Army, lacking cavalry due to transport limitations, was unable to counter these swift raiders. Eventually, horses were brought over by ship from Esroniet, allowing the Imperials to resist the attacks more effectively. Soon after, Tsayeshi emissaries arrived in Ioneth under the guise of diplomacy. A truce was established, and the legions and settlers began to prepare for winter. The cold season, however, proved disastrous. A severe sea storm prevented the fleet from reaching land, cutting off essential supplies. On the 5th of Sun's dawn, Tsayeshi envoys, claiming to bring a royal surrender, betrayed the city's guards, opening the gates to a surprise attack aimed at assassinating the Emperor. The 10th Legion managed to repel the assault. Spring offered no relief. When the fleet finally returned, it was in ruins, having suffered heavy losses to relentless storms on the Padomaic Sea. The expeditionary force was starving, and local agriculture had failed. Through spring and into summer, intense winds from the east scorched the land, drying the farms and turning the river to mud. Debate still exists among imperial scholars whether these events were natural disasters or caused by Tsayeshi sorcery meant to weaken the invaders. From this point on, the fate of the expedition grows less clear. The battle mages responsible for maintaining magical communication with Tamriel were transferred to the fleet. using their abilities to shield the remaining ships in a last effort to resupply the army. By late 289, the Red Fleet had returned to Black Harbor, thanks to the battle mages. But every attempt to go back to Akavir was thwarted by increasingly violent storms battering Esroniet. By year's end, the troops in Ionith and Septimia were starving, worn out, and demoralized. In mid-sun's height, scouts reported that a large Saseshi army was gathering beyond the northern mountains. The Snake Men had outweighted the Empire. Uriel understood that staying in Ionith meant slow death, so he took a desperate gamble. Gathering the remnants of all 4 legions, the Emperor led a march from the outpost in mid-sun's height, leaving behind only small forces to defend the 2 cities. The Saseshi, not expecting their worn-down enemies to brave the mountains, were caught off guard. Uriel's forces descended into northern Snakeland and overran a major Saseshi camp. However, reinforcements soon arrived from the hills and forests surrounding Uriel's army. Vastly outnumbered and nearly encircled, he was forced to retreat, harassed all the way by Saseshi cavalry, suffering heavy losses. A small portion of his army made it back to Ionith, where the Sashi then besieged both colonial outposts. At this point, escape was the best possible outcome. Of victory was no longer attainable. Some of the Imperial fleet had managed to get through the storms and was on its way to Septimia to evacuate the survivors. Despite his flaws, the Emperor showed honor and resolve. In Evening Star, he gathered the remains of the 10th Legion and led a determined charge from Ionith. They formed a shield wall and held off the much larger Sayesi force, long enough for the remaining legions to retreat to Septimia. By the time the fleet arrived, the city was under siege. The battle mages on the ships managed to hold the attackers off just long enough for the exhausted survivors to escape. Among them were 2 soldiers from the 10th Legion, who confirmed what many feared: Uriel V had died in battle, and the Imperial invasion of Akavir had failed. Had events gone differently, Uriel V might have rivaled Talos in legacy. Instead, his memory is mixed celebrated as the Empire's 2nd greatest warrior king, but also remembered as one who charged too recklessly into the unknown and paid the price. Still, his reign wasn't without achievement. His precise and methodical military reforms brought stability to Tamriel, quelling unrest and civil strife. While Akavir slipped from his grasp, territories like Roscria remained in Imperial hands for generations. Despite its disastrous conclusion in Akavir, Uriel V's rule helped stabilize the Third Empire. His successors Uriel VI, Morihatha, and Pelagius IV during a relatively peaceful era, but that peace began to unravel when Pelagius IV was succeeded by Uriel VII. More than any emperor before him, Uriel VII's reign was shaped by a series of anonymous heroes who repeatedly helped restore peace and justice. Early in his rule, Uriel VII leaned heavily on his battle mage advisor Jagger Tharn. With Tharn's help, he tightened imperial control in the east, especially by integrating House Halalu of Morrowind, who then helped spread imperial influence. But as Uriel matured as a ruler, Tharn feared he'd become obsolete. In a bid to keep power, Tharn used a dark artifact called the Staff of Chaos to trap Uriel in oblivion, using illusion magic to impersonate him and rule in his place. Tharn's neglect fractured the Empire. War erupted between Dark Elves and Argonians in the Arnesian conflict. Skyrim annexed parts of eastern High Rock and Hammerfell, and the Khajiit and Bosmer fought over borderlands. This turbulent period known as the Simulacrum, ended when one of the anonymous heroes, known as the Eternal Champion Exposed Tharn, defeated him, freed Uriel from oblivion, and restored him to the throne. Remarkably, Uriel VII was able to bring stability back to the Empire, largely with the help of the Blades. Is this conversation helpful so far? In addition to serving as the Emperor's personal guard, the elite warriors who descended from Reman's Akaviri Dragon Guard also acted as secret operatives across the provinces, using political manipulation to restore order. One of these operatives was the second of Uriel's anonymous champions, known as the Hero of Daggerfall. When the Numidium, Tiber Septim's ancient brass golem, reappeared in the Iliac Bay, this hero skillfully navigated the region's complex politics. As a result, the powerful Dwemer construct vanished from the world, and the previously divided kingdoms of High Rock became more united and loyal to the Empire than ever before. While the Emperor focused on the west, trouble emerged in the east. In 3E427, Red Mountain erupted with ash, filling the air, while a deadly disease called Corpus spread among all social classes. At the same time, the powers of the Tribunal Vivek, Almalexia, and Sothasil began to decline. Before becoming deities, the Tribunal had served as advisors to the Chimer leader, Indoral Nerevar, but betrayed and killed him to steal the heart of Lorcan, the source of their divine power. As Morrowind suffered, Emperor Uriel VII released a prisoner from the Imperial City and sent him to the ancient homeland of the Dunmer. This prisoner was believed to be the Nerevarine, the reincarnation of Indoril Nerevar, destined to bring balance to the region. How the Emperor knew this remains a mystery, but the Nerevarine fulfilled his role by destroying the heart of Lorcan beneath Red Mountain. This act ended the plague in Morrowind and stripped the Tribunal of their godhood, ending their rule. Though Morrowind was stabilized, a greater crisis arose in 3E433. At this point, attention turns to a man who sought to create his own version of paradise, Mankar Camoran. His father, Haman, had attempted to take the Bosmeri throne during the reign of Sephrus Septim II and led a destructive campaign across western Tamriel using the Wood Elf army. His invasion was stopped in 3E267 by the united forces of High Rock. Haman's pregnant mistress, a Bosmer named Kalis, escaped into the wilderness and gave birth to Mankar. Little is known about Mankar's life. Though born to Wood Elf parents, his adult appearance resembled that of a High Elf. Like his father, who reportedly summoned Daedra to fight for him, Mankar developed a deep connection to the Daedra. Eventually, he was chosen by the Daedric Prince of Destruction, Mehrunes Dagon, who gave him the Mysterium Zarxeza, corrupting and dangerous book. Consumed by its contents, Mankar devised a radical new worldview. He believed that Mundus, the mortal world, was not the center of creation. In his view, Lorcan was actually a Daedric prince, and Tamriel was a Daedric realm stolen by the Aedra when they tore out Lorcan's heart and buried it beneath Red Mountain. Convinced that Mehrunes Dagon deserved to reclaim this realm, Mankar founded a secret cult known as the Mythic Dawn and began recruiting followers from across Tamriel. On the 27th of last seed, 3E433, disaster struck when Geldal, Inman, and Ebel, Septim the Emperor's sons, were all assassinated simultaneously by the mythic Dawn. In the chaos that followed, a group of blades attempted to escort the Emperor to safety through a hidden path beneath the Imperial city. There, they encountered a prisoner, Uriel's final champion. Recognizing the prisoner from his dreams, Uriel entrusted him with the Amulet of Kings and tasked him with delivering it to Geoffrey, the leader of the Blades. The Emperor was slain by agents of the mythic Dawn shortly thereafter. Since Akatosh had bestowed the Amulet of Kings upon Queen Alessia ages ago, Tamriel had been protected from Daedric invasion. Although skilled conjurers could summon Daedra, the Daedric princes themselves were unable to enter Tamriel at will. That divine covenant was now broken. Across the land, Oblivion gates erupted, unleashing legions of Dremora. Thus began the Oblivion Crisis. A nameless prisoner journeyed to Waynan Priory and entrusted the Amulet of Kings to Geoffrey. There, the leader of the Blades explained that the only way to halt the invasion was for a dragonborn heir to relight the dragon fires at the Temple of the One, wearing the amulet to restore the pact with Akatosh. However, the dragonborn lineage existed solely within the Septim bloodline, and all known heirs had been killed. In the city of Kvatch lived a priest of the 9 divines named Martin, unaware of his true heritage. He was the last hope for Tamriel, but Kvatch had already fallen and Oblivion Gate had opened at its gates, and Daedric forces overwhelmed the defenders. The prisoner entered the gate, sealed it from within, and became known as the Hero of Kvatch. During the attack, a young priest had protected many civilians by sheltering them in the chapel of Akatosh. The hero found Martin among the survivors. Though initially reluctant, Martin accepted his destiny and agreed to return to Waynan Priory. Yet the mythic Dawn remained ahead of them. Upon their return, the amulet had already been stolen by cult assassins. Undeterred, Martin, Joffre, and the hero traveled to Cloud Ruler Temple, an ancient Akaviri fortress and Blade Sanctuary. There, the Blades acknowledged Martin as Martin Septim, the rightful Dragonborn Emperor. Meanwhile, Oblivion Gates continued to spread chaos across Tamriel. In Alinor, the devastation was severe. The Crystal Tower of the oldest and most powerful magical structures stood in Somerset beside the Adamantine Tower and the White Gold Tower as part of the world's foundational structures. As gates opened, many Altmer fled to the tower, trusting in its magic for protection. But the Daedra summoned destructive forces that toppled the tower and killed thousands within. In the east, the situation was equally dire. The Dunmer, still recovering from the loss of their tribunal, fiercely resisted the Daedra. In Aldruin, a city built within the remains of a giant emperor crab, the mages of House Redoran reanimated the carcass, turning their entire city into a weapon of war. Despite a brave attempt, Aldruin still fell, and its Dunmer inhabitants were slaughtered. However, not all of Tamriel was unprepared. The Argonians of Black Marsh, deeply connected to the hissed ancient, intelligent trees that created and guided them, were ready. The Hiss had foreseen the coming crisis and used their sacred sap to enhance the Argonians, making them stronger, faster, and nearly immune to pain. So, when Oblivion Gates opened in Black Marsh, the Argonians charged into them, launching a brutal counterattack that forced the Daedra to close the gates to avoid being overwhelmed. Meanwhile, in Cyrodiil, Martin Septim, the Blades, and the hero of Kvatch began working on a way to end the Daedric invasion. The hero infiltrated the mythic Dawn cult by posing as one of its members and attended a secret gathering where they encountered Mankar Cameron. Although Cameron escaped through a portal into oblivion, he left behind a vital item, the Mysterium Xerxes. By studying this dark tome, Martin discovered a way to reach Cameron's realm. He would need 3 items: a Daedric artifact, a great Welkin stone, and the blood of the divines. The hero was tasked with retrieving them. The Daedric artifact was obtained from one of the princes, though which one is uncertain. The Welkin stone was found in the Aeliad ruins of Miscarcand, relics of a time when Daedra freely roamed Tamriel. The divine blood was acquired from the armor of Tiber's Septim in Sancre Tor, which still held traces of his mortal blood. However, one more object was necessary: a great sigil stone from a major Oblivion gate. Martin decided to let such a gate open outside Bruma, triggering a massive battle. Soldiers from all across Cyrodiil joined the fight, with Martin leading them in Tiber Septim's armor. Amid the chaos, the hero entered the gate, seized the sigil stone, and closed the portal, saving the city. With everything in place, a portal was opened to Monkar Camoran's domain, Gair Alata, pocket realm of oblivion, and a twisted version of the paradise he promised to create. The hero confronted and defeated him, reclaiming the Amulet of Kings. Martin and the hero rushed to the Imperial City to relight the dragon fires and restore Akatosh's covenant, but it was too late. With Cameron dead, Mehrunes Dagon launched a final assault on the city, appearing in person as a colossal, nearly invincible form. The barriers between worlds were shattered, and the dragonfires could no longer stop him. After fighting through the chaos to reach the Temple of the One, Martin realized that only a final, ultimate sacrifice could end the invasion and seal the rift to oblivion for good. Emperor Martin, the last of the Septim dynasty, destroyed the Amulet of Kings and transformed into an avatar of Akatosh, taking the form of a great golden dragon to defeat Mehrunes Dagon. By doing so, he sacrificed his mortal life, becoming one with the divine. The Oblivion crisis came to an end, but it was a bittersweet moment. While his sacrifice ensured that no Daedric prince could ever invade Tamriel again, the death of Martin marked the extinction of the Septim bloodline, descendants of Talos Stormcrown. The Empire, already weakened by Dagon's assault, and now without a ruling family, began to fall apart. At this low point, the remnants of the Empire faced a new threat. In the Somerset Isles, a group of High Elves began to consolidate power, with plans to reclaim their ancient territories and exact revenge against the Empire that had once subjugated them. The Age of Men was ending, and a new Eretha, Rise of the Thalmor, loomed. As the Fourth Era began, the Imperial throne sat empty, and Cyrodiil descended into political turmoil. For Morrowind, this was disastrous timing. Centuries earlier, a meteor known as Bardau had nearly destroyed Vivec City, but the god Vivec had halted it in midair. However, after Vivec and the Tribunal vanished before the Oblivion crisis, the meteor became unstable. In the 5th year of the Fourth Era, it resumed its fall, causing a catastrophic explosion that devastated Vardenfell and triggered a massive eruption of Red Mountain, leaving much of Morrowind covered in ash and uninhabitable. Amidst this disaster, the Dunmer people, already feeling abandoned by their gods, faced a new threat: the Argonians of Black Marsh. long oppressed by the Dark Elves, rose up. Having proven themselves against Dagon's forces, they sought revenge, led by the Angelil, a native faction opposed to outside rule. They invaded southern Morrowind in a brutal retaliation for centuries of enslavement. The extent of their territorial gains remains uncertain, but the weakened empire was powerless to intervene, and Black Marsh broke away under the Anne, Silio's leadership, leaving the empire's eastern territories lost. In the 10th year of the Fourth Era, High Chancellor Okado, who had been acting as regent in the absence of an emperor, was assassinated. This plunged Cyrodiil further into chaos as warlords fought for control of the imperial city and the Ruby Throne. This civil strife lasted until the 17th year of the era, when a Colovian general named Titus Mede captured the capital and restored a semblance of unity to the fractured empire. Though lacking the legacy of the dragonborn emperors, Titus Mede, I proved a capable ruler and a practical military leader. However, his reign faced continuing challenges, chief among them the rise of the Thalmor in the west. To many across Tamriel, the Thalmor were seen as cruel and power-hungry zealots obsessed with racial supremacy, a reputation not entirely undeserved. Yet, it's important to understand how such a radical group could emerge within High Elven society. Throughout the Empire's history, some Altmer resented being ruled by men, never forgiving the devastation brought upon them when Tiber Septim unleashed the brass god Numidium on their lands. Their bitterness deepened when Septim was deified, an insult to the Altmer who believed themselves to be the rightful heirs of the Aedra. Despite the Empire's claims of enlightenment and unity, it had forged its dominance over the Elves through conquest and bloodshed, and the Elves, with their long lifespans, never forgot. The Thalmor had long existed as a political group in the Somerset Isles, but during the height of the Empire, they remained a minor influence. The Oblivion Crisis, however, provided a chance for their rapid rise. Amid the chaos engulfing the Imperial City during the invasion, pro-Imperial forces in the Isles granted the Thalmor significant authority to help repel the Daedric onslaught. The Thalmor apparently proved themselves effective leaders as they managed to push back the Daedra despite the devastating loss of the Crystal Tower. After Mehrunes Dagon was banished from the mortal plane, the Thalmor retained the emergency powers they had been given. In the 22nd year of the Fourth Era, they took control of the Somerset Isles and renamed it Alinor, reviving its ancient name from before the time of Tiber Septim. Not long after, they expanded into Valenwood, the homeland of the Bosmer. Valenwood's fall in the 29th year appears to have been facilitated internally. Several influential Wood Elf clans in Falinesti were already aligned with the Thalmor before the crisis and seemingly welcomed them into the region. With Somerset and Valenwood reunited, the Aldmeri Dominion dormant since the Second Era was reborn. Over the next 70 years, the Thalmor solidified their hold. Their next expansion came in the 98th year, when Nirn's moons, Masser and Secunda, vanished, though the cause remains unknown. The event was catastrophic for the Khajiit of Elsewhere, whose religion and biology are closely tied to the moons. 2 years later, the moons returned, and the Thalmor claimed responsibility. Whether true or propaganda, enough Khajiit believed them that by the 115th year, the Thalmor successfully orchestrated a takeover of Elsewhere dividing it into Anakina and Palatine, two ancient kingdoms. The Aldmeri Dominion now dominated southern Tamriel and was nearly as strong as its ancient predecessor. Meanwhile, when Titus Mede II became emperor in 168, he inherited a diminished empire consisting only of human provinces. Even within these, Hammerfell had regressed into civil strife between the Crown and Forebear factions of the Red Guards. Though competent, Titus Mede II was no mythic hero and would soon be tested by war. On the 30th of Frostfall, 4E171, a tall, golden-skinned Aldmeri ambassador arrived in the Imperial City with supposed gifts for the Emperor. During his audience, he issued an ultimatum. The Empire must dismantle the Blades, pay tribute to the Dominion, surrender parts of Hammerfell, and most controversially ban the worship of Talos. The Emperor refused. Prepared for rejection, the ambassador overturned his cart, revealing the true gift, a pile of 100 severed heads, the remains of Blades operatives previously stationed in Alinor and Valenwood. The Empire scrambled to respond, but the Dominion had already prepared. Thalmor forces, led by Lord Narafin, emerged from hidden camps in Elsewhere and advanced into southern Cyrodiil with little resistance. Leowyn quickly fell, and Bravel was soon besieged. At the same time, Lady Arenelia led a coordinated attack from the west. Elven Marines landed in southern Hammerfell, while her main forces overwhelmed the Imperial legions near the Valenwood border. The Imperial forces resisted fiercely, but ultimately in vain, as the Elven battle mages advanced steadily through Colovia. When Arenelia's main army linked up with her Marines on the coast, the legions were forced to retreat north through the Aliker Desert, an ordeal later known as the March of Thirst. In Hammerfell, local resistance was weak due to internal conflicts among the Redguard factions, which left them incapable of mounting a strong defense. Most of western Hammerfell, with the exception of Hegathe, soon fell under Thalmor control. In 172, Anvil was captured by Arenelia, who then focused her efforts on taking Hegath, a city that continued to resist. Meanwhile, Lord Narafin seized Bravel and utilized its large merchant fleet to transport troops across the Nibin River, beginning a push along its eastern bank. Although reinforcements from Skyrim were sent to slow the Thalmor advance, they were only partially effective. The Empire was gradually losing ground in a war of attrition in Cyrodiil. In Hammerfell, however, the situation began to change when a Forebear army lifted the siege of Hegathe. The cooperation between the rival Redguard factions, the Crowns and the Forebears, led to a reunification of their forces. The surviving Imperial soldiers from the Desert March regrouped near Dragonstar and were reinforced by fresh troops from High Rock under General Decianus. With resistance intensifying, Decianus launched an offensive. In turn, Arenelia sent an expeditionary force east, leading to a fierce battle at Skaven, where both sides suffered heavy losses. This resulted in a deadlock in Hammerfell, as neither side could make further gains due to depleted forces. The setbacks in Hammerfell made it clear to Aldmeri leaders that prolonging the war risked growing instability. They decided to commit everything to a decisive attack on the Imperial city, aiming to force a surrender and end the conflict. By 4E174, the city was surrounded by elven battle mages. Emperor Titus Mede II, recognizing that the city could not be saved and that reinforcements from Skyrim would arrive too late, chose to abandon it. As the Thalmor began their assault, with devastating magical attacks. The 8th Legion held the southern and western walls in a desperate last stand. Meanwhile, the Emperor led a breakout through the northern gates and joined with Skyrim forces in Bruma, escaping through Pale Pass to safety. Though the Emperor survived, the city fell completely under Thalmor control. Following the capture, the Imperial Palace was destroyed. The White Gold Tower was looted, and atrocities were committed against civilians. By the winter of 174, most of Cyrodiil, apart from Bruma and Chidenhall, had fallen to the Aldmeri Dominion. With the capital taken and the Emperor in hiding, the Thalmor expected a surrender, a belief that the Emperor encouraged while secretly preparing for a final counter attack, the Battle of the Red Ring. In early 4E 175, Titus II gathered his remaining forces into 3 army groups in the outskirts of Cyrodiil. Tamriel, a land where the gods destroyed Lorkhan and left behind their towering fortress of secrets, where the mortal realm of Mundus meets the endlessness of oblivion and the eternity of Aetherius. Over the ages, many rulers have attempted to control it, but only those chosen by the gods have succeeded. Welcome to our video exploring the history of the Elder Scrolls universe, where we begin our journey into Tamriel's past, focusing on the empires of men, specifically the third and most renowned of these empires, the Septim Dynasty, the bloodline of Talus Stormcrown. Powerful bloodlines hold great significance in many fantasy worlds, none more so than in our sponsor, Bloodline Heroes of Lithos. This unique RPG lets you pair mighty champions to create offspring that inherit their traits, gradually strengthening your bloodline and selecting the most powerful heirs to lead your kingdom. It's free to play on Android or iOS. Log in now to get the Dragonborn clan Karg, one of many champion clans, including the formidable Lycanis werewolves. As you progress, more companion options will become available. Eventually, you'll receive a free half Dragonborn, half demigod heir to further your kingdom's legacy. Their power will help you address the economic, political, and military challenges ahead, and in time, they will empower the next generation. Strengthen your relationships with your companions to produce even more powerful offspring. By combining different bloodlines and traits, you can create the ultimate heirs. Download the game for free on Android or iOS using the link in the description or the QR code on screen, and use the code BLDHOL1 for a free champion token, 100,000 gold, and 100 diamonds. Begin your journey to meet true companions in this unique RPG. The earliest known inhabitants of what would become Tamriel were the Beast Folk, the ancient ancestors of the reptilian Argonians, feline Kajiat, and other species like the ape-like Imga, as well as the now extinct Foxfolk and Birdfolk. Later, the Aldmer, or Elder Folk, arrived, landing millennia ago on what is now the Somerset Isles, beginning the Merethic era, the Age of Elves. From there, the Aldmer began colonizing the mainland, driving the beast folk into the harsh deserts, jungles, and swamps at the continent's edges. In the heart of Cyrodiil, they constructed the White Gold Tower, which would forever symbolize imperial power for anyone who controlled it. As time passed, the Elder Folk became more divided. The Elves, who settled in modern Morrowind, became the Chimer, ancestors of the Dark Elves. At the same time, the Elves in the White Gold Tower evolved into the Ayleids, or Heartland Wild Elves. These two groups began worshipping the Daedra of Oblivion, a practice their Aldmer ancestors had strictly forbidden. Some elves became the Dwemer, or deep folk, rejecting the supremacy of all gods and forming underground technocratic societies. Those who ventured into the forests of Valenwood became the wild and carnivorous Bosmer, or Wood Elves, while those who remained in High Rock or Alinor became the Altmer, or High Elves, the closest descendants of the original Aldmer. There is little agreement about how or when humans first arrived in Tamriel. According to Nordic myth, they were created on the highest mountain in Skyrim by the sky goddess Kine. Regardless of origin, by the middle of the Merethic era, various human tribes had spread across the continent,